Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. And guys, we finally have gotten our wish. It's finally happening. The NBA is returning to our lives. It's great. Yes, the NBA has returned. The league has approved a 22-team plan to bring the NBA back and play all their games in Orlando. It will include, I believe, 5 Western Conference teams after the 8th spot and 1 Eastern Conference team after the 8th spot. They will all have 8 regular season games before the playoffs. The rule is, for the 8th spot, if any team is within 4 games, they'll have a play-in. If there is no team within 4 games, there will be we'll just automatically start the playoffs, and the 8th seed will be the 8th seed. So clearly, as I've said, this is a very exciting time for a lot of people in the NBA right now, as the league and the NBA is coming back. And I think a lot of people really need this because of what's been going on in the world. I mean, I've seen some reactions all day to it. Some people are not sure how to feel because of what's going on in the country. And even though, yeah, of course, yay, basketball is back, but it's like, but we still have this going on. You have some, obviously, who are extremely excited, like, yes, NBA's back, time to watch LeBron win a championship for Kobe, time for Kawhi to go out there and show he's the best player in the game, all of that. You know, and then you have people who are just like, I have no excitement for it whatsoever. So, it really just depends on what category you may slide yourself into. And so for me, I think it's important as a group of people, you know, we have to understand that the NBA will not be the same old NBA that we've seen. There will not be crowds. We will not hear loud crowds for Game 7s. The atmosphere won't be the same. We are going to be watching scrimmage games live on TV, but at least we have the access to these guys, to watch them play, to watch them ball, to see the performances, to still see numbers put up, to still see a champion be crowned. And that is what it's about. And I mentioned this at the end of last show. I commend and I applaud Adam Silver for everything he has done to get us to this point. He has truly done everything he's needed to do. He stayed in contact with the players. The league has looked up every possible avenue, gotten feedback from every player, coach, GM, owner in the league to make this decision possible. They've done it all. They've done it all. And it's great to hear and see. It really is great to hear and see because, you know, these situations don't always play itself out like this. Like I said, just to know that the NBA is returning, it's just such a great thing to see and a great thing to notice. Because we as people have to understand that, you know, with the NBA coming back, we get something we've been wanting for a while. You could say we've even craved it for a while. And like I said, it's going to affect the sports world, not seeing without fans, but I still think it's something we can embrace and enjoy. And I'm excited for the NBA season to come back and just, you know, be able to just, in a way, take somewhat of a break away from what's going on in the world. Because listen, you know these channels and these shows, they're still going to give spotlight on what's going on in the country. So you're never get a full takeaway from it. But at least it's to the point where, yeah, that's going on, but at least we have something else we can go to as well. So obviously, that's obviously very exciting. around the league, even though you don't hear a lot of players tweet about it, obviously, again, because of what's going on in the world today, you're not hearing a lot of people tweet, a lot of players talk about it, because right now, that's not the main concern for a lot of these players. That's not the main thing for a lot of these players. They'll get to that when the season comes around. Because one thing we have to always keep in mind, too, even though they have improved this, they actually don't start playing games till late July. So we still have about a month and a half, almost 2 months to go before they play. So it's still some time in between now and that. That's why you probably, again, won't see a lot of players really build up to it like that till maybe we get closer and the camps begin. Because then when camps begin, that's when you'll start to maybe see them, okay, yes, basketball is back. We're back in camp. It was nice seeing my team. It was nice with my coaches. Everybody's getting themselves adjusted to, going to Orlando, living in that bubble life for a few months. They said the latest possible game could be in October 12th, I believe. So that's a very late game. And obviously December, they're still planning to start the season. So that'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And then they have to fit the draft and free agency in between that time slot as well. So the NBA has a lot of interesting things that they're going to go get into. And one of the most interesting things as well that I've read and I've seen from all the reactions is that the NBA is taking a big chance right now with where they're starting the season at, because they're going to be going into peak NFL season, peak college football season. And I think that's why a lot of people are actually very surprised by when this could end, because your playoffs are going against football. And football is known as the top sport in this country. People will take football over any other sport any day of the week. And so people really think, NBA, you're extremely popular, but can y'all really compete with the NFL? Because obviously viewership and all that counts, especially if you're playing with no crowd. And let's say college football and NFL football has crowds. It seems like a better presentation and a better sport to watch at that moment. So the NBA has to face that as well. But I'm sure they'll be ready for it. I'm sure they understand what they're going against. I'm sure they understand what's going on. I'm sure they understand what's the next thing they got to do to be in the right position at the end of the day. And I think they're going to do what they got to do it, because the NBA cannot be scared. They want to crown a champion. And I think at the end of the day for them, it's like, yeah, ratings count. Yeah, all that stuff matters. And we want people to watch us, but at the same time, we also need to crown a champion. We also need to have a good game. We also need to have good playoffs. We also need to finish the season. And if we could just do that, we will ride and we will go with whatever happens when it gets down to it. And I think that is the right and correct approach to take in this situation because of what's going on. And so obviously, like I said, like with basketball coming back, this is great. And listen, we'll have to see what happens with college basketball. We still don't know. Even though the belief will probably be if football can play, basketball can play, because you can't say why would the football players be able to play, but the basketball players wouldn't. So I'm sure if college football does actually end up having a season, college basketball will also return, and so you'll see also college basketball around as well. And this will also really be one of the first times where you'll see college basketball basically right after the NBA season starts. College basketball will start to slightly gear up when it gets closer to November. So when that gets closer to November, it's still not a big gap in between basketball. It's like end of the season, draft free agency, college basketball starts to gear up. Then you have the NBA season that starts at Christmas. So then everything lines up perfectly for there just to be continuous basketball. And obviously this is probably a dream come true for sports networks, because they have so much content to talk about now. You got 2-3 major sports going on at the same time, 4 major sports going on at the same time. There will be unlimited topics to talk about for days. So it's going to be a great time for everybody in this situation, knowing that you have all this available to you. And I think that's something that we definitely should look forward to when it gets down to it. But coming up next on the GSMC Basketball Podcast, I'm going to discuss more in detail the 22-player format, the 22-team format, expectations, how do we think it's going to go, how do we think it's going to all work out, and basically all the details that I think you should know about this plan that they've approved. All that right here and more on the podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed how the NBA has now returned. The NBA is back. The NBA is coming back. They're ratified. Go ahead, play. Go ahead and just go ahead. We're going to have the season, finish the season out, have playoffs. They have a format set up. They've already agreed on it, and they're going to go ahead with it. Exciting times. Exciting, really. It truly, truly is. It truly is. And so what we're going to do this segment is we're going to break down more of the details of what's going on and what's happening. And discuss how they're going to do this 22-team format to resume the season and finish the season. And obviously, again, I'm doing this to obviously allow y'all to understand all the details that are going into the NBA returning and how they're going to play it out. So, first, obviously, each of the 22 teams will play 8 regular season games in Orlando for seeding purposes for the playoffs. Clearly, this is needed just to make sure you know who you got going to playoffs. So, we have the playoff setting set when we get to it. So obviously this is why they've done this. 8 games probably will give every team enough time to kind of adjust themselves in the standings. It's enough time for a movement to happen. And obviously also gives them game reps that they can use to get ready for the playoffs. So it's not like they're just coming back with playoffs automatically. Per Shams Charania of the Athletic and Stadium, the new structure is expected to include 16 teams that would have been in the playoffs when the season was suspended in March, and 6 additional teams with a play-in tournament for the 8th seed in both conferences. And the rule for that 8th seed is this. If the 9th seed is more than 4 games behind the 8th seed earns the playoff spot. But if the 9th seed is 4 fewer games behind the 8th spot, then the 8th and the 9th seed will enter in a play-in tournament that is double elimination for the 8th seed and single elimination for the 9th. So obviously, with that being known, clearly this gives teams that are maybe within 4 or 3 games a chance to still be close to potentially getting in there. So obviously that's important for teams like the Kings or the Spurs or the Pelicans who are still fighting and jockeying to be that 9th spot. The plan is for the teams to continue with their schedule as planned, with the next 8 games. If the team is scheduled to play the Hawks, Bulls, or Pistons, it moves on to the next game on the schedule. So basically, I'm assuming that means they're going to get an automatic win right there, because you can't just not count it. So I think they're just going to go ahead and give them the automatic win. I think with that. So if you play the Hawks, Bulls, and Pistons, that's 3 automatic wins right there. So I don't think anybody has that on their schedule, but obviously that would probably be an advantage if that was the case moving forward. Also, Cardina noted in this proposal that this proposal was drawn up based on feedback, collaborative discussion, and input the NBA has received from people throughout the league. And that's one of the reasons why I said great job for the league. Because listen, they hit everybody up about this. They asked everybody about this. They were checking with everybody and saying, listen, what would you prefer? What would work for you? What would you like? That shows leadership. That shows constructiveness, knowing that, okay, if we're trying to do this, we need to make sure everybody's on board or else nobody's going to do it. So obviously asking everybody is very, very important, because obviously it shows that everybody's voice matters. Everybody has a chance to be in this situation, and we're going to do anything we can to potentially help you be in this situation so then we can bring the league season back and be great. Also, Cardina noted, but previously, that the league discussed 4 different return scenarios during the call last week, but 2 of them, one that would skip right to the playoffs with the top 8 teams in each conference, and another bringing back all 30 teams to finish a 72-game regular season with a playoff tournament, recently lost traction. I reported in my last episode, obviously teams that are not in this, only issues they have is like, think about what Lloyd Pierce came out and said, the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. My young guys are young. They need some playing time. That's why they said the teams that are not in this mixture want some type of regional tournament or camp so they can get them in and play some basketball, because you're asking a lot of those 8 teams to not basically pick up a basketball for almost 8 months and say, okay, now it's time to play basketball again. So I can understand them hopefully trying to maybe say to the league, can we have something going on? Can we do something so we can get some type of play action or sometimes some playing time or some type of training or something? Because I don't want my players being rusty because they haven't touched a basketball in like 6 months in real competitive game action. According to Wojnarowski, the 6 teams not currently among the top 16 will play in Orlando, including 5 Western Conference teams: New Orleans Pelicans, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Phoenix Suns, the Sacramento Kings, and the San Antonio Spurs. And in the Eastern Conference, the only team that isn't in the top 8 that has a chance to get in is the Washington Wizards. The Trail Blazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs were all within 4 games of the Memphis Grizzlies in the West when play was suspended. The Wizards were 5.5 games back of the Magic before it was suspended. So obviously, with all that being known, that's big. And it will always be big. Because obviously, this basically, you clearly see what's going on here. You clearly see the collaborative effort in that report on how we got back to this point. And that's really one of the biggest things, like I've said. It's just getting back to this point was one of the most important things that they could have done. Because obviously everybody wanted this, and putting them back in this position helps. It really does. It puts them in just a great position. You know? Obviously, we're also going to talk about, you know, some of the winners from this, the way this format is scheduled out, and this is according to Bleacher Report as well. They say Giannis is a winner because obviously the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, and you know, being able to potentially still play the Orlando Magic or even the Washington Wizards, you would think obviously Milwaukee probably has one of the easier paths to the Eastern Conference Finals, knowing that their first round matchup won't be that tough, and they'll get 8 games to get ready for it, so they won't be too rusty or too sloppy coming out of the gate when it initially gets to it. Then, you know, obviously the Magic are one of the biggest losers just because they're 5.5 games above the Washington Wizards, but still might not even make the playoffs. If the Wizards can get within 4 games, they're going to have a play-in, and they could lose. And, you know, the Magic really, if the season had continued as like expected without COVID hitting, they basically would have had an insurmountable lead the Wizards would have had to overcome them, and they probably would have made it in there, and they could have also been the 7th seed. Now, they have to worry about the Wizards not being within 4 games and hope they can still maybe jump Brooklyn for 7, because trust me, they'd rather play the Miami Heat, Boston, or one of them before they play Milwaukee. They feel like they may have a better chance against that team than the team they would have to be supposedly supposed to play. So obviously that's big. Another win in this situation is John Morant and Memphis Grizzlies, because literally they're more, unless they just lost 8 games, they're going to be in that play-in, or they're going to be in, they're going to play in. Because since they're the 8th spot with 3.5 games, all they got to do is just stay in the 8th spot. And then they'll get the play-in. They're going to have a chance for sure to make it in. that won't be a problem. So that's just a couple of winners and losers right there from Bleacher Report. But coming up next, I'm going to bring my friend Ethan onto the show again for his take on basketball returning and what he thinks and all that. Hear it more on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Again, we have one of the greatest hosts ever step foot or be on GSMC Podcast Network. Ethan, say hey to them, Ethan. Say hey to your adoring listeners.
Oh my gosh, what's going on, guys? I'm back, second week in a row, talking some basketball. You know, I like to do this too, so it's not just a football guy. I do cater myself to some NBA topics of discussion. So let's go ahead. Let's get active. Let's do it.
All right, great, man. So, obviously, of all these basketball fans coming together, we've been taking an eye on the NBA, obviously, through this process, obviously, with COVID hitting the league, obviously making the league stop and pause in place, and obviously putting the season on hiatus. But, as I said at the beginning of the show, the NBA is back. And, Ethan, I want to know, what are your thoughts on the NBA returning to us, the people who've been waiting for this? And then before Ethan gets into it, I just want to break down again what they approved. It will be a 22-team. Basically, 22 teams will be participating in this 8-game regular season. Obviously, if you were within 4 games of the 8th seed, there will be a play-in tournament for the 8th seed to get into the playoffs. So these 8 games are primarily just for playoffs positioning. And also, and then now the playoffs will go as usually as planned, which is 7-game series, 1, 2, 3, you know what I'm saying, finals, all that. So, yes, Ethan, what are your thoughts on the NBA returning?
One, I'm happy to hear that it is coming back and they figured out a plan. And it seems like they've done the NBA really tried to do all the right things, and they definitely made Adam Silver look like probably the most competent GM that we have in pro sports. And it showed that he was listening to all sides and trying to really make this work. And it looks like the owners really trust Adam Silver really to handle this as best as he can. I think he really made them trust him even more with the outcome of where the season is going to come. Because, you know, unfortunately, everybody else can't play who were not really that deep into the 8th seed. And they got eliminated automatically. So, you know, Chicago, the Knicks, a lot of people from the Eastern Conference and things like that. So a lot of these guys are already out of the playoff berth. I think Golden State is still in the Team 22, which is...
No, they're not, because they're part of the 8 teams that are not, because the
really?
The teams that remained are teams that I believe that are all 4 games within the 8th spot, except in the East. The Wizards are 5.5 out, but they're giving them a chance.
Okay.
But in the Western Conference, I think the lowest teams out is 5 games, and they're all giving them a chance to still get themselves in the playoffs.
See, I thought I misread, and I saw they weren't in the 8 teams that were not involved because, you know, they wanted to. Basketball is a different level when you have Steph Curry, and I couldn't imagine having Steph Curry come back when NBA comes back and being basically a torch carrier for the sport, so to speak, during this hard time. But that's fine. We have a lot of torch carriers, like for the fact that Zion still has a chance. And unfortunately this season, I was not able to see Zion play for the first time. That just means I'm going to have to go probably 2 to 3 times when the NBA comes back next season. Hopefully we'll be at a state in this country to where we can go to live sporting events again. But I got to go see my man Zion in person. It has to happen. So that's great for guys like the younger guys who are still in playoff contention. They don't basically waste a year as far as getting that playoff experience, because I think guys who get playoff experience early have a better grasp on how to handle the second season a lot better. So, for example, let's look at not Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who actually I think that's his cousin. So that's pretty cool. But Shai and, of course, his running mate over there in Landry Shamet, the first season, right, before all the trades happened, they got premium levels of playoff experience going up against Golden State at basically the peak of their power, and they fought toe-to-toe. They tried. For a long time, they took Golden State to a tough play, and they definitely gave them their all, and that experience definitely helped them and molded them to the players that they've become now in the NBA, especially Shai, as he not only learned a lot from Chris Paul, but he learned a lot from those playoff games and being involved in a full regular season like that. So playoffs are really, really important. So when you look at guys who are like Memphis, who are holding on for dear life for that 8th seed, and you see Ja and you see Brandon Clark, and you see younger guys like, of course, Jaren Jackson Jr., who I think should be healthy at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So all these young guys are going to get quality playoff experience if they make it, and that is something very valuable to take as well. And then, of course, you know, it's not bad that LeBron doesn't have to waste another year, right? That's the main thinking. All these guys who are 10 years down the line, you know, every year counts, and you have to be able to make sure that you maximize your potential to win as many championships as possible. Because at a certain point, when you're 10 years in the league and you've made a lot of money, the money doesn't matter anymore. And maybe back in the 90s or back in the early 2000s, you know, it was harder to come by for monetary profit and making big money contracts. But with the TV deals of how many people watch the sport, how global it is, money is not an issue. You make money, you can make money with ads and, you know, sponsorships. Money is not an issue anymore. But the championships and the narrative around those championships are still very valuable to players and their legacies. And people are still trying to build and finish off their legacies, in their opinion, the right way. And LeBron is probably on top of the list. And you got to think about Giannis. This could be Giannis's time to get his first. This could be James Harden's time to get his first. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, should I say. And, you know, of course, this could be Kawhi and Paul George's tag team championship. There's just a lot of things on the line for this season that potentially may not come up again, because we don't know if we'll see this level of LeBron next season or ever again, right? So if this is LeBron's last really quality elite level season, it would be really shameful if we lost it due to something that we obviously couldn't control. But I'm glad that the NBA is back.
All right, yeah, definitely, man. That's very well said, very well said. You made some really good points. And I guess one thing that's interesting about the NBA coming back is the whole – well, okay, I was reading something the other day from Bleacher Report about the winners and losers of the NBA coming back. And it's interesting to me that if you think about a team like Portland, and, you know, obviously they've been hurt the entire year. Nurkic didn't play. Zach Collins didn't really play. You know, people have been hurt all year. Now they're coming back, having a chance to still make the playoffs. They're going to be healthy. And then you have maybe a team like, you know, Washington, even though John Wall won't come back, even though they're coming back. You know, if that actually happened, or if John somehow said, you know what, I can play now, that would make the Wizards more interesting. It's really interesting because this break is going to create all this rest for the stars. So now everybody should be pretty much healthy going into this. And so no one's going to be over here like, okay, we're banged up going into the playoffs, or we're banged up going into the end of the season. It's like, okay, well, everybody's ready to go. We just got to go. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But Also, one thing about it is, do you think them starting the season like this, do you expect to see very sloppy basketball at first? Or because they're going to have weeks to like do camp, but like, do you expect it to be like really sloppy, or do you expect it to be a decent level of play?
I think it will be NBA level basketball. Like, these guys are professionals. They've probably been in shape this whole time because the players wanted to play. And I don't think there was any doubt in their mind that they weren't going to play. At least until the very beginning. The very beginning, maybe. But now, ever since probably late April, I'm pretty sure they thought that they were going to be playing at some point. And the athletes that care and want to get this done and really, really try are probably still in shape. Like, I've seen all the Russell Westbrook in shape videos working with Kevin Hart and their similar trainers. These guys are keeping in shape because that's all they know how to do anyway. You can't do much else besides work out in their big facilities and all this stuff. So it only makes sense that they try their best to stay in tip-top basketball shape. Maybe camaraderie-wise or team chemistry-wise, it may be a little bit weird, but honestly, they've been playing for so long this season that I don't think that would be a super big issue. It'll probably only take a few weeks to get right. I don't think it'll take that long.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense because obviously, like I said, these guys have played basketball their whole life. So a lot of these guys still be playing during the off season. So it's just a matter of maybe just getting some kinks out, getting everybody back on the same page. But outside of that, they should be fine. But we're going to end the segment right here. But coming up next, we're going to talk more about the NBA returning, and I'm going to ask Ethan who do he thinks could be the biggest challengers to both number one seeds coming out of both conferences. All that right here and more on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, and we're just going to dive right into it. So, Ethan, question. So, obviously, the Eastern Conference is a different story, so we'll get to that when we get to it. But on the Western end, we're going to talk about the Lakers here. Out of the 5 teams that are, or 6 teams if you want to call it, that are battling for that 8th spot, Memphis, Sacramento, Phoenix, San Antonio, the Pelicans, and the Blazers. Obviously, I don't think anybody's expecting the Lakers to lose to any of these teams, but which team do you think could give them the best challenge in the first round out of all the teams that I just listed?
Out of all of them, I would say that the challenge would be we probably don't want to face a hot Portland, especially if they get a lot of their injured players to return and really push for this playoff push. And I say that because you never really know what could happen if Dame gets hot, and we know CJ is very much a competent second option. And if they get Nurkic back, that's a really good third option, and Collins is really solid as well. And size-wise, it's very hard to match up with the Lakers or one of the bigger teams in the NBA, if not the biggest. But as far as being able to be up for the challenge and keeping up, Dame Lillard is somebody who can explode for 50 at any given night. So that's somebody that I would think the Lakers would not want to deal with. Another team, not to be biased or anything, but I think the Pelicans are a really, really, if they figure it out, right? I'm not saying that they will, but we already saw sample sizes of what Zion is capable of, and unfortunately we didn't get to see another 2-3 months of Zion really growing into his own, but he really looked like he was becoming one of the premier stars in the NBA already at his young age. And I have to believe that they can really size up well with the Lakers and do some things that a lot of other teams can't do. This team is young, they can run, they can pass. On paper, they're supposed to be able to defend, but in reality, they're still a young team, and it's hard. Zion had a tough go defensively for the first couple games, first few weeks of his debut in the NBA, but he started to figure some things out. And of course, Derek Favors is a very solid veteran. Lonzo, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram in a playoff series against the Lakers, their former team. And that would be really, really incredible to watch because that would be their first time in the playoffs too. And of course, we know Drew Holiday is one of those guys who chooses to rise for the occasion, especially in playoff time. We really do see a lot. And of course, it's just the storylines would be pretty cool because, of course, Anthony Davis and all this stuff. So I think that would probably be the most storyline-rich first round anybody else could have. But other than that, I don't really see the Lakers struggling with anybody really too hard in the first round, honestly, because the 8 seeds out there currently, or the people fighting for them, have clear flaws, and the Lakers are pretty much kind of like an iron juggernaut. And I don't mean that to say they're unbeatable. What I mean is, the last time we saw the Lakers, they really looked like they figured some things out. Like, they beat Denver and the Clippers back-to-back. Or was it? No, it wasn't Denver. They played Denver, though, in this stretch. But I think they played Milwaukee and they played the Clippers. And it just looked like they were very dominant. And it was looking like this could be an issue for other teams coming into the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And, the Lakers, like I said, they were playing some of the best basketball before the season on hiatus. So if they can regain that form and where they were at that time, I think they'll definitely be the team that obviously people say this is why we project them to be a championship contender at the end of the day. But now shifting to the Eastern Conference. So we're not going to talk about the AFC because clearly we know Magic, Wizards don't have a single shot at this one. So we're just going to talk about the Eastern Conference as a whole. Who do you see as the biggest challenger to the Milwaukee Bucks coming back from this hiatus?
Okay, so let me remind myself who was in the bottom half of the East, because I'll be honest, until this whole thing really got confirmed, I wasn't too sure who to check in on. Do you have that on paper right now?
Oh, who's in the Eastern playoffs right now?
Yeah, or the bottom half of the AFC.
Well, I mean, there's only one team that's outside of the top 8 that has a chance to make it, which is Washington, which is not what I said. Is Washington, and then there's Orlando, and then Brooklyn still technically, even though they're 7th, is very close to Orlando's record, so they're technically in as well.
Okay, yeah, I figured that's much. So, one, we don't need to see Brooklyn in the playoffs, but unfortunately this is a thing because, unfortunately, the East is not good at the bottom. And it's unfortunate that is, but that's the reality of the situation. Kevin Durant is not coming back. We have no idea what Kyrie Irving is going to do at this moment in time. And to be completely honest, they've been a team all year that's been very inconsistent and nowhere near as on the same page as they were last season with D'Angelo Russell and all those locker room guys, and Karis LeVert may have regressed a tiny bit this season, and I don't know if that's due to all the Kyrie stuff or the injury things. It could be a bunch of stuff. And then, of course, Spencer Dinwiddie, he's still a guy that, of course, he's going into a contract year, and I'm sure he will want to make the playoffs, but at the same time, we don't really know what Brooklyn has left in the tank, and if they don't have their star player, not to mention star players, we don't know what they can do. Orlando is Orlando, and what I mean by that is we've seen Orlando play for years, and they somehow kind of trickle their way in the 8th seed, and they may steal a game, but I'm sorry, but Vucevic and Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba, sometimes that's not enough. It will never be. It's not enough. I'm sorry, but if Vucevic is still your first option, we may have problems. And, it'd be cool to see Markelle Fultz on a bigger platform to see just how much, because a lot of people haven't really paid attention if he's, he's improved as a basketball player in general. His shot still is atrocious, but hey, it looks like he's more confident playing in Orlando than he was in the spotlight in Philly for as long as it was. And it looked like this was much better for him as a growth as a player than Philly ever was to him. So that's cool. But that's really it. And we don't want to see Washington. It's just a bad group.
You don't want to see the Bradley Beal show?
Bradley Beal
trying to will their way?
Listen, I feel for Bradley Beal because he wants to win in his own way. He wants the Wizards to be relevant basketball-wise, and I respect him for that. But let's not. Washington isn't winning nothing this year. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA before the season was halted, and he was not a good defender this year. They have some of the worst defenders on the team as far as NBA wide. They have three of the worst NBA defenders in the league on the same team. It's just not good. John Wall will not return, and I don't necessarily blame him, because why are you just going to come back for 8 games in a potential 5-game series? It's not reasonable. And that's just kind of it. And they're 5 games out. So unless something catastrophic happens to the next 2 seeds where they just start tapping out, I just don't see them sneaking in the 8th seed. So it's really not, that whole matchup is just not good.
I understand. Now we're going to switch to this. So, okay, we talked about who's going to challenge them. Now, just in general in both conferences, who at this very second, you're subject to change your opinion after we have the regular season games going into the playoffs, but at this very second, who would be your favorite to win it all at this moment?
To win it all? I got to believe that LeBron sees this as one of the very few, if not the last time, he has a real shot. And by real shot, I mean he is the alpha dog. He is the number one option. He's the guy that makes the whole system go. Because if LeBron wanted to, of course, he could play until it's time. He can't walk no more. And he could Vince Carter it. But he never would do that. Most guys at his level, his caliber, his stature will never overstay their welcome, I don't think. At least not in reality. They wouldn't subject themselves to being a role player. LeBron could never be a role player at this point in his career. We saw it with MJ. Really. If you look at MJ's numbers on the Wizards, he was still shooting the ball pretty heavily, and some nights it looked pretty bad, and other nights it was wow, he still has it. But for the most part, it was a weird walk-off season. And I don't think LeBron sees this as a weird walk-off season. This is something that he is putting a lot of work for and able to try to achieve. So I think, without major injury, this is probably LeBron that we're going to see focused and completely locked in to win.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, like I said, I think a lot of people also still want the Lakers and LeBron to win it for Kobe as well. Obviously, that would be a great ceremony, a great celebration at the end of the season if that was able to happen. But it's going to be tough getting there. And even though this may have been probably the weirdest season in NBA history, at least we're still going to be able to crown somebody at the end of the day, which is what all the players want in the NBA. But thank you, Ify, for coming on for another week, giving your expertise in basketball. I always enjoy having you on the show, man. Have a good rest of your day.
You too, man. Appreciate it.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Basketball Podcast. Obviously, just got off the phone with my good friend Ethan. Obviously, another great call into the show here. Obviously, I love having him as a guest on here to talk about basketball, because you can tell, how he feels about basketball and how everything's going, bringing it back and etc. But also still about stuff that's happening in the world today and everything. So obviously, I'll probably have Ethan on here again in the future. Obviously I'm not gonna try to have him too much, but here and there I'll try to have him on here if any big news really comes out, and let's discuss with him what he thinks about the news sometimes from time to time. So that's obviously going to be fun and exciting every time he comes on to the show, because we love having him on here. And obviously, again, if you want to listen to me and Ethan have on our own podcast, watch our show, our GSMC football podcast that comes out on Tuesdays. If you want to hear me and Ethan talk about NFL, college, all that, and right here on the podcast, or right here on the network as well. But now, obviously, we have to go more back into serious things right now that's happening in the world, and serious stuff that's going on right now. And obviously, I'll obviously touch on this in my football podcast, but Drew Brees, obviously this is an NFL guy, but you'll see how it's related to basketball, made a comment about what's happening in the world right now, and basically was just like, hey, I don't want anybody disrespecting the flag, even though they were talking about all the racial injustice and everything about, like, okay, players could kneel again, right? So obviously when he said that, a firestorm happened on social media, and everybody started getting on to Drew Brees, who was considered probably one of the nicest men in all of the NFL. So obviously that was big, seeing that. So obviously that happened, and it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, oh, snap, that's crazy. But so, obviously LeBron James commented on it, and basically was just one of the many people who were like, what do you mean, the flag? This isn't about the flag. You really think Cap did all that for the flag? Obviously, if you know LeBron James's history, LeBron has been very active in these types of situations, very active with activist roles, and very active with what's going on in the world, and speaking his mind on things like this, and that's one thing that I think, obviously, LeBron gets a lot of hate for, but there's also a lot of people who appreciate him for it as well. Obviously, other people, Steven Jackson has weighed in, CJ McCollum weighed in, because Aaron Rodgers, also a quarterback in the NFL, made a comment about it, and obviously his comment was very well received, because he said it was never about the flag, and it never will be. And obviously CJ McCollum came out and said, we need more Aaron Rodgers, not Drew Brees. And so, obviously, I just want to talk about the role that the NBA has had in all of this. Obviously, I've talked about before all the protests you've seen all these players go to, but like I said, you've seen the activism on social media that they've had, the actual just, outpouring for everything that they're saying and everything that is happening, getting everything they need to say out of the way, commenting on posts, spreading awareness, all of it. And they've been just so excellent with it. But like I said, basketball is pretty much ran by the players in terms of what direction the league goes in, what they feel like is best moving forward. And obviously, if the NBA players are very active with this type of thing, for sure that the NBA itself and the league will be active in these situations. And so, there was a situation that happened where the Kings play-by-play announcer basically was asked by DeMarcus Cousins, a guy who he had kind of slandered in the past, saying, DeMarcus Cousins left a dark cloud over the franchise. And DeMarcus came to him and said, well, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? And obviously he talked about All Lives Matter. And this comment was seen as insensitive. And then the Kings play-by-play resigned. And now is not play-by-play for the Kings anymore. So obviously they'll have to find a new guy to replace him. But clearly, as you can see, you can't get away with stuff like that when it comes to these NBA players. They will get onto you about it. They will find you. They will go after you because they know what's going on in the country and they know what they want out of this respect. Tobias Harris made a comment saying, people say they hear us, but they ain't listening. There's a difference. You have to have comprehension. And that's something that he basically said that people aren't having right now. They're not having the compensation. And so I think that's big. And that's why I respect and I appreciate the NBA so much for everything they've done, because you can see it representative with the league and everything. You know, and they're so representative of everything that has happened, because they literally have always been at the forefront of these movements. Black Lives Matter, protests, everything. The activism from the players has been amazing. The donations have been great. And so, and it just shows that, listen, the NBA is definitely a league that should be looked at as the shining league, the league that shows the most care and respect for its players and its organizations and everything, because they truly go out of their way to create an atmosphere that works for everybody and makes everybody feel like within the league we can be ourselves, we can be vocal, we can talk about issues, we can go out of our way and handle situations a certain way and not have to be afraid of backlash from the league, because we know the league supports them. If people give us backlash in the media, we know that the league got us. You know how comfortable that must feel, knowing that your employer has empowered you to be this way? That's one thing Adam Silver has done for the players since he became commissioner. He's empowered the players. And so now you're seeing players be truly themselves at all times, whether it's in press conferences, on the court, social media, real life. It's not like they have to put on this persona to protect the shield. It's what you see is what you get. Who I am is what you're always going to get. And you see the authenticness of the players because of that. Because they don't have anything they have to hold back on or be afraid of or anything. And that's something you can't hate on. That's something you can't be against. That's something you can't sit here and say you don't like, because it's great to see. And, you know, I really hope that we continue to see it moving forward, because that's why we love the great game of basketball, you know. And people ask me all the time, what's your favorite sport, football, basketball? I can't really answer that question, but I know who has my respect more, and that's the NBA and everything they've done. But, so, that's all we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some more basketball news and conversation. All that right here and more on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, I talked about just, you know, obviously things that have been happening around the league from an activist standpoint. obviously LeBron James and a lot of NBA players going after Drew Brees after the comments he made about the flag and everything, and during the protests and everything that's been happening in this country. We also discussed, obviously, the Kings play-by-play also resigning after his All Lives Matters comment. And I also just talked about how great the league has been with all their activism. And basically, again, it's great that the NBA empowers their players to be themselves, empowers their players to be who they want to be. Because that should be what you want. You should want the players to be who they want to be. And obviously that's fantastic to see in and among itself. So obviously that's obviously a great thing to come across and put your eyes on. So now I'm going to break down all the teams that are slotted into potentially making the playoffs from 8th down. Obviously we'll start with the Western Conference. And we're going to talk about the San Antonio Spurs first. Obviously, San Antonio's chances, I believe, are still slim to none. San Antonio just is a team that they just don't have the guns. They just don't have the firepower, the talent to do it. The reason why they're able to compete is because they just are so well coached, so disciplined, they don't beat themselves. But after a while, you got to have the talent. And the Spurs have players. It's not like the Spurs don't have a lot of great players, but sometimes it's just there's a talent level in this league. And if your best player is DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge, you've seen how this has gone. You're not winning a championship with that. And now it's to the point where they may not even make the playoffs with that. And obviously everybody knows the Spurs has to do some very hard thinking this offseason because you might have to break the team up. And then we don't know what Greg Popovich might do. Would he not want to be a part of a rebuilding process? Because they have some young guys there that they like, but it's just what would be the best ideal and the best thing to really, just go out of their way to make sure everything works out. I think the Spurs are, like I said, they're not going to beat themselves. They still have Greg Popovich, so you always have a chance with Greg, but I just don't think they have the guns at the end of the day to really get themselves into the race, to me. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Another team that's on this list, the Sacramento Kings. Nobody really thought about Sacramento really being a true playoff team in this race with all the stuff that's happened this year with them. But they're in it. And, the Kings are the one team from a talent perspective. They're probably a team like the Pelicans, young talent, young stars. But the Kings, it just feels like a lot of stuff just hasn't meshed under head coach Luke Walton. And so there's questions about his competency with the team. Does he fit what the team needs to get over the hump? And I think a lot of people are feeling that he's not. And so some people are wondering, is that what's going to keep them from making it? Now they're within 4 games, so they have a chance. They've been still fighting to the end. You could even look at them maybe as a dark horse, potentially, in this race to make it because of that. But we don't know. We really don't know what Sacramento team we're going to get out there. But I do feel like they are probably one of the biggest wild cards in terms of teams that are being able to come back and have a chance to still make the playoffs. Another team, obviously, they have the New Orleans Pelicans. Obviously, the Pelicans are a very young team, but they have a lot of young talent. Drew Holiday, veteran point guard, averaging 20-7. Brandon Ingram, averaging 24. Josh Hart, one of the tough, grittiest players in the league. You have your superstar in Zion Williams, who, when he did play, you saw was one of the most unstoppable players in the paint. And so you can clearly see, with that being known, that the Pelicans are probably who the NBA wants to get in from a star power perspective because of who they have on their team. Zion, like I told you, moves the needle for them. So having a LeBron versus Zion matchup would be ideal for the league. Plus, all the Lakers who got traded by them. It's not because, this series would be super duper competitive. It's because of just the storylines that would come out of a series like this. And that's why the NBA would probably prefer this be the series that actually ends up happening, just because of the storylines and the names. So obviously that's a very big thing right there that we need to keep an eye on, because the Pelicans do have talent. And they were kind of the trendy team to make the playoffs as well down the stretch. The other team in this situation, the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, I think they're in the Spurs category. Not really a team that you think is going to get over the top, but they're also a team that you don't think it, but I feel like we shouldn't be ruling them out either. They do have Devin Booker, who was averaging 27 a game. DeAndre Ayton has been a very good player for them. Kelly Oubre has had a breakout season. They've played better basketball overall than they've played in the last few years. Again, I look at them as the Spurs, not really much of a chance, but they're interesting. They're interesting on paper. And with that interestingness, it really helps them when it comes to potentially going forward and trying to make the playoffs. Because the Spurs, I think, will be an interesting team to end up watching, actually, at the end of the day. Then, obviously, the Portland Trail Blazers. They're probably, from a talent perspective, the best team left in that group. Because they have Damian Lillard who can go off. CJ, they're getting Nurkic back. He was very key. The Portland Trail Blazers have never really had Nurkic healthy. And he's one of their best players, if not their third best player. Hassan Whiteside leads the lead in blocks. He's played well for them. They're also getting Zach Collins back, another 7-footer who can stretch the floor. You still got Melo. This Portland team was always a team that had injuries all year long, was never healthy all year long. Now they're coming back healthy. Now they're coming back fully equipped, rested, and ready. They're the team who probably could give the Lakers the most issues, and also probably the team who's the best left. So this would probably be the NBA's ideally second best matchup. Plus, it's obviously probably the most competitive matchup they actually could probably get. So obviously that's going to be a big deal for them. And then, on the Eastern Conference side, you have the Wizards, who, again, it seems slim to none, but at the same time, there's a chance. They just got to get within 4 games of Orlando. Orlando, they just need to win 2 more games than Orlando does. And they'll be within 4 games. And once they do that, they'll have a chance. Bradley Beal has a chance to get the Wizards with no John Wall to the playoffs. Because John's not coming back till next season. He's not coming back just because the season's coming back. He ain't coming back till next season. So this is still going to be the Bradley Beal show. And obviously, if Bradley Beal gets him into the playoffs, you can look at that as a win. Because, hey, listen, we got to the playoffs without John. We got some young talent. So to me, we got something here we can work with and build off of. And that's really all you look for a lot of time in these situations. Do we have something we can build off of? But that's my breakdown of all the teams' chances and what I think about them coming back into the season. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate everybody listening today, tuning in, talking about the basketball. Obviously, we're all excited for basketball being back. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to subscribe or review, leave a comment, give us 5 stars. It really helps us. We appreciate it. And listen, whatever you're doing out there during all this chaos in America, 2020 is a book, but you are still writing this book, and never forget that. For Brice Lewis here at the GSMC Podcast Network, everybody have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.